Too many words and not enough time. I want to start this morning by showing you one of the most famous pictures from the 19th century, which isn't saying much because cameras were pretty just kind of invented at that time. When I first saw this picture, I thought it was fake. I thought it was like from a movie or AI generated, but this picture is real. Check this out. That actually happened. In 1895, in a train station somewhere in Paris. I can't pronounce the name of the city, so I won't even try. But this is real. So the story is that the conductor they were running a little late, and he decided to speed up a little bit. So he went a little faster than he was supposed to, and he sped up to 35 miles an hour. That was fast for those days. So they were going 35 miles an hour. They got close enough to where they had to slow down. He pulled the air brake. Air brake didn't work. And they jumped the track, and obviously this is an elevated station, went through a giant stone wall and ended up on the street below. A little bit of a tragedy. A person did die who was standing on the street, several injured. The train itself surprisingly wasn't damaged though. Once they hoisted it back up and kind of got it all situated, minor repairs, it was right back in service. But what I want you to see is that this train that had 6 passenger coaches, 3 luggage cars, blasted through a stone wall with surprising power. Now I want you to hold this picture in your mind, and I want to show you another picture which is not famous at all. It's actually pretty boring. It's this picture. So this is also a train, if you can't tell. But it's not the train that I want you to look at. It's this little orange piece of plastic down here. This orange piece of plastic is called a wheel chalk. This one in particular, I looked up the specs this morning, like a train nerd. It's about, I think it was 3 inches off the ground, and it weighs 4 pounds. A 4-pound piece of plastic, and this train can't move at all. And it's newer, nicer, and probably can go faster than 35 miles an hour, but this train can't move at all because of a little orange piece of plastic. Now I want to compare the two. The first picture you saw was a train that blasted through a stone wall, flew through the air, and landed on the street. This train can't move an inch. Here's my question. What's the difference? What's the difference between these two trains? One can blast through a wall, one can't move because of a 3-inch orange piece of plastic. So I want to give you the answer, but I want to give you the answer in the form of an equation, okay? I'm bringing math in, okay? So here's the equation that shows the difference. It's P equals M times V, and I know some of you are like, I struggle with church and I struggle with math, and now you're putting math in church. And this math even has letters, and that's a lot. This is a simple one. So the M stands for mass. So how much the thing weighs. The V stands for velocity, how fast the thing is going. So mass times velocity equals, and I know you're thinking it's going to be a P word. It stands for momentum, which doesn't make any sense at all that it would be P, but it seems like M was already taken. So the answer to how one train can blast through a stone wall and the other train can't move because of a 4-inch piece of plastic is momentum. That's the difference. The difference between being stuck and blasting through barriers is momentum. So last week, if you were here, we talked about being stuck and what it takes to get unstuck. And we talked about a faith-filled, humble decision and how God uses that. And that gets you out of being stuck. But what I want to look at today is not stuck, but what the opposite of stuck is. And you might think like, well, the opposite of stuck is unstuck, but I want to take it a little further than that. I don't think unstuck is a great answer, especially for our purposes when it comes to your life, feeling stuck in your life. The opposite of stuck is not unstuck. The opposite of stuck is having momentum. Because stuck feels like you're doing the same thing and getting the same results, and it's just very repetitive in a negative way. But momentum is repetitive in a positive way. You're making decisions and making progress. You're doing something and moving forward. The opposite of stuck is momentum. So I want to talk to you about momentum in your life today. How to think about it, how to get it, how to keep it. And you can have momentum in all different kinds of areas of your life. Hopefully you've experienced this in some areas of your life before. You can have it in your professional life. You can have momentum. You can have momentum in your financial life. You can have momentum when it comes to your physical health. You can have momentum in your marriage. You can have momentum parenting. You can have momentum in your ministry. You can have spiritual momentum, like in your spiritual life. Momentum is an amazing thing to experience. Turns obstacles into speed bumps. Creates opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. It attracts allies and it silences critics. Well, most of them. Some of them are still pretty stubborn. It compounds growth and multiplies progress in your life. Momentum can be your best friend. If you've ever experienced it, well, I'll be honest, if you have momentum, you even look better than you really are. You're able to keep going, and it just makes everything just move. Momentum. If you don't have it, you want it. If you do have it, you really want to keep it. So here's where I want to start. I want to show you a picture I want to show you a verse that is kind of the verse equivalent of the picture of the train going through the wall. And I know the train going through a wall is kind of a bad thing. You're like, that was a tragedy. I'm using it in this sense as a positive thing that you can blast through anything in your life with momentum, that you can push through any barrier, break through any obstacle. So I'm viewing that as a positive thing, and I want to show you the verse equivalent. When it comes to momentum, this verse has the same energy as the picture of the train blasting through a wall. And you've heard it before. So it's 1 Samuel 17, 48 and 49. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into a shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in. They leave that part out in Sunday school. A little graphic. And Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So here we have David taken down Goliath. Arguably the most famous thing that anyone has ever done. I want to say, like, it's up there, right? Everybody knows this story. This story is iconic. This story has become a cliche, David and Goliath. We talk about it all the time. And it's one of the greatest things that David did in his life. So here's my question. How did he do it? How did David do this? And I don't mean like what was his technique or what brand of sling did he use? We get obsessed with weird stuff like that. Like, what do you have for breakfast? Like, come on, guys. I mean, what led up in his life to this moment? What were the decisions that led to this decision? What were the victories that led to this victory? So if you back up just 10 verses, David is trying to convince the king of Israel to allow him to go fight Goliath. And he's trying to be persuasive here. And this is what he says in starting verse 34. But David persisted. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord, who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear, will rescue me from this Philistine. Yeah. Get a little goosebump. I'd say go fight him. David, you got this. Like, just based off that little speech. Whew. So how did David take down Goliath? I want to argue momentum. He had momentum in his life. Goliath was not a single event. I know if you're familiar with the story and like maybe you're newer to church, you're like, I know the story, but that's not the whole story. Goliath is not just an event. He is a link in a chain of events. He's a chapter in a book of events. Goliath didn't happen in isolation. It happened in sequence. Goliath wasn't a train sitting on a track. Goliath was the train going through the stone wall in David's life. And did you notice the way David talks about this? It's a little detail. I've ignored it my whole life. I don't know. I never noticed it. He says in verse 36, no, go back up to 35. There we go. Where does it say that there's lions and bears? What verses? You split me up. Now I'm all confused. I promise I studied, guys. I promised. 36. It is verse 36. It's 36. Go back to 36. Follow me. Look at you. Okay. Lions. That's at the top. That's why I didn't see it. Lions and bears. Did you see that? Have you ever noticed that? It's not. You think one lion and one bear. That's pretty good, right? But he's not saying that. He's saying no. There's a pattern here. There's a direction to the way David was going in his life. He was defeating lions and he was defeating bears. Multiple. It required momentum. So I think without momentum, not only does David not beat Goliath, I don't even think he goes out to fight Goliath if he didn't have momentum. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you 5 principles to momentum in your life. 5 principles to momentum. And the reason this is important, so we're in this series called Seasons and Cycles, and we've talked quite a bit about being stuck and what it feels like, if I can say it this way, what it feels like to lose and how to get out of like a losing streak. But what I want to do today is I want to kind of shift into a different mindset and talk about how to get a win streak going, how to manage a win streak. Because I think so often we focus on what to do when you're losing, but we don't even talk about what to do when you're winning. And that might actually be some of the problem why you get thrown back into the losing side of your life is because you don't know how to manage a win streak. And I also know that sometimes what happens is we only come to church when things are bad, which is why talking about how to get unstuck is a really important thing. And then what happens is when things start going good, we stop going to church. We start to ignore God, and then things start going bad. So I want to really focus on what it's like, how to manage like a win streak in your life, to get things going in your life, to make those kinds of decisions. And if you're like, I'm not winning right now, we'll just take some notes. Maybe this will be important later. Hopefully it's important later in your life. So 5 principles of momentum in your life. Number 1, some wins require momentum. Some wins require momentum. Goliath can't fall without the lion and the bear falling first. David didn't just jump straight to the iconic victory. Did you notice? It didn't just go straight to Goliath. He had some speed. He captured momentum, and then he took down Goliath. Is it possible that some of the wins that you want in your life, some of the goals that you have in your life, you can't just jump straight to them? That you might actually need to like back up and like get a running start, if that makes sense. You might need to back up and get a couple of smaller wins to get your speed up before you can actually take on the big thing that you really want. So here's an example. You might say, man, I wanna be debt-free in my life. I don't wanna have any more debt. That's a great goal. And you might even imagine like what that would be like. Like, man, can you imagine like not having that weight of all these bills constantly coming in and all that debt? Can you like, and you could dream that up and you could say, that's what I want. I want to be debt-free. And it's good. And at first you might be like, here we go. And you get all excited about it. But I think you'll notice if you've ever done that, especially if you have a lot of debt, is that can be overwhelming. And maintaining your endurance as you head towards that can be really difficult if you keep that as being the big win. But I think for something that big, you gotta back up and it requires momentum. So what if instead of just saying that, you actually started to break it down and had some smaller things in between you and it, like, hey, what if we just went after like one credit card first? The smallest one or the one with the highest interest rate, whichever method you wanna go after. What if we did that first? And then what if we made a budget, like actually wrote out a budget to make sure that Amazon doesn't show up every day at our house? Like that was the point. What if we deleted the Amazon app off of our phone? Like what if we did that? You know what I'm saying? Like smaller wins. By the way, I said this first service and that was the thing that I said that offended people the most was that. So I'm sorry if you're offended just now. Like people took that personal. But the principle is, the idea is that if you have this big thing that you want, can you back up and try to get some small wins? Because that's what will happen if you pay off that credit card and Amazon does stop showing up as much. And then you start to see the momentum head towards the big thing. Some wins require momentum. So what are you after right now in your life that's so big that you need to get some momentum going towards it? How can you break it down and have some smaller steps? Have you ever heard that thing where I think it's like an army general or somebody, and the general's probably too high, who did a TED talk about making your bed in the morning. Have you heard this? Guy talks about making your bed. Says the most important thing that you can do is make your bed in the morning, which I'm like, really? I'm just gonna get in it again at the end of the day. So I don't actually take this advice. But what he says is if you make your bed, you get one thing where your brain says, did it, check. And then it starts to create, he doesn't use this language, but it starts to create momentum. I did this, Now I'm going to sit down and read for a little bit. Now, you know what I mean? We're going to take some time to pray, and then I'm going to remember to brush my teeth this morning. Like all these, like you're going to have some momentum, and the day feels different when you start it with a win. So his mentality was start with this thing. Now I don't make my bed because, like I said, I get right back into it. But I do have some things that, like, the first thing I do is open up the Bible app. I don't do anything else. I don't even get out of my bed. I open up the Bible app first thing. That's the first win for me. And that's no matter what. Most of the time I'll read a chapter, but if I'm like doing that thing, you know, where you're trying to fight with yourself, like I got other stuff too, I'll at the very least read one verse, and I never start the day any other way. And that's my first win. So the idea is get some smaller ones and get momentum, because some wins in your life require momentum. Second principle, if you want momentum, don't skip dessert. I know. You're like, that sounds counterintuitive. Depending on your goals, if you have some kind of weight goal, that's not the best. But let me explain. Some of us, maybe all of us, get really caught up in the big thing. We want to blast through the big wall. We want to take down Goliath, and we get so caught up in that we don't even consider smaller wins a win. We don't consider a little bit of progress to be progress at all. And you do this, you're the kind of person that does this is the high achiever, the person who they're just an achiever. And what you tell yourself is, like, that's the goal, that's the thing, I'm not gonna celebrate until I get that. These little things don't matter at all. Like, I'm not gonna celebrate a tiny victory, I'm not gonna celebrate a little win, I'll celebrate when I get there. So you tell yourself it's because you're a high achiever. You think you have to accomplish everything before you can celebrate anything. You think you have to accomplish everything before you celebrate anything. But what you need to realize is not celebrating the small stuff is killing your momentum. Bible way to say that is you're despising small beginnings. You aren't allowing yourself to mentally and emotionally celebrate any progress to the point that it feels like you're not moving. And that's the thing, it's a mental thing, it's an emotional thing. If you don't let yourself celebrate small progress, then you're gonna feel like you're standing still because you're like, it doesn't even count as movement until I do that thing. And you're not allowing yourself to feel that. I did this, when I graduated from college, I didn't walk. I didn't go to the ceremony, you know, with the hat and stuff. But I told myself, well, the reason I'm not doing that is because I'm going to go back and get my master's degree. So I didn't allow myself to celebrate the small thing. And it was stupid. It was stupid. And I've been doing this my whole life. Every time I accomplish something little, I'm like, no, I'm not going to celebrate that because this is the real thing. This is the real thing. And then here's the real dirty secret. Even when I do accomplish the thing, I move the goalpost. Well, you know, this was good, but what would really be good? Does anybody else do that? You never celebrate. You never feel like you accomplished anything. So, and again, it just kills your momentum. You create a world where you're not moving even though you're moving. And that's why celebrating the small things is so important. So what small win can you celebrate here? What progress do you need to acknowledge mentally and emotionally? Like, hey, did that, check, here we go. Don't skip dessert. If you want momentum, don't skip dessert. Number 3, momentum is not about getting a win. Momentum is about what you do with a win. It's not about getting that win, it's about what you do with the win. So last week when we talked about getting unstuck, obviously to get unstuck, you need that first win, right? If you're on a losing streak, the way to stop the losing streak is to get a win. So you need to get that first win, and that first win creates movement. Good. We've said yes to God. We've made a good choice here. Movement is better than non-movement. But I want to say that what you do with that first win, the second win, you get the one, but then how about the second one? I actually want to argue, certainly when it comes to getting unstuck, the first win is the most important win. Getting unstuck, it is. But if that was a question on a test, what's the most important thing when you're stuck? Getting the first win, hey, check, that's it. But if the next question was, what's the most important thing when trying to create momentum? I would actually say the answer is your second win. Not the first one, your second one, and here's why. Because I see people do this all the time. So let's talk about when it comes to your relationship with God. You might have a situation where you say yes to God and you take a step. And now you've got movement. You've done something. It's a good thing. Yes, I said yes. It's good. But what do you do next? See, what a lot of people do is they get one yes, and then God nudges them for that second thing, and they go, no. And then they say, okay, but yes to this, but then no to that. And then yes to that one, but that one, no. And what they have then is movement, but they don't have momentum. There's no direction to it. They say one yes and then a no. They make one good decision, then a bad decision, and all it does is create movement, not momentum. I have this mean thing I say in my head sometimes about people. Not you. Other people. And in my head, it's almost turned into a joke in my head. It's like the highest insult I can give somebody. Remember the Sandlot movie where they were going back and forth with the insults with the kids on the bikes, and they had the nice thing, and it ends with the biggest insult of all: you play ball like a girl. And it's like, roasted moment. I know you're not even allowed to say that as an insult anymore, as weird as that is. But for me, this is that level in my head. I'm like, I got him. I got him. So here, and you won't even be impressed, but here it is. Here's what I'll say, meanest thing. You can't string two good decisions together. That's what I'll say. Boom, roasted. Got him. That's the meanest thing I can say. And in my head, here's why. Because I have so many interactions with people who they can get a win, they can take a step, but then they overdo it. They're like, look, I took one good step, but then they don't take the second one. They don't take the third. They just stand here on the one, and then immediately they take a bad one. They make a good decision, and then they make a bad decision, and they make no progress. So for me, when I say you can't string two good decisions together, I'm basically saying you're stuck. You can't move. Because a win is an event. Momentum is a trajectory. Anybody can get a win every once in a while. That's not actually that impressive. It's the intentionality to say, yes, I've got this one, and I'm also going to take the next one. And so think about David. David could have killed the lion and retired. Right? He could have been done. That's it. I'm good. I killed the lion, and this is me now. I am the lion slayer. And that could have been a pretty cool title to have. I'd take that one, David the lion slayer. If I killed a lion, you would call me Adam the lion slayer. I'd drop my last name. That'd be how you know me now. But he could have made one right decision and done nothing with it. And instead of having momentum, instead of a direction towards the most important thing that he did, he could have stayed here. And he never would have experienced that. It wasn't the win, it was what he did with the win and the next one. And I even want to say this, so if you got baptized last week, that's awesome. It's my favorite thing as a pastor. Those are the best weekends when we see people take that step of faith. But for me, that's a yes to God. That's a yes to God. So you just took one, and here you are. You said yes. But I really want to encourage you, don't stop there. Don't just stand right here. You got to look for that next thing that God's nudging you to do. Take the next step, whatever it is. Don't say no, and don't hesitate. That's the other thing that'll kill momentum. Kill it. If you hesitate, if you say, God, yeah, that sounds good, but not right now. And we do that all the time. I think that's one of the biggest things that kills spiritual momentum in our lives. It's not that we say no to God, it's that we say not yet, not right now, because we know that we can't say no, right? You're like, I can't say no to God, so I'll just say, I'm not ready for that. That's code for no, right? God knows that, by the way. He's smarter than us, our little tricks. But delaying also kills momentum. And it's even worse because you're telling yourself, I'm still going, even though you're not. And you fooled yourself into thinking that you're still saying yes, when in reality, you're not. You're saying no. It's not about getting a win. Momentum is about what you do with that win, that second win, to get trajectory. All right, fourth thing when it comes to momentum. When it comes to momentum, what got you here won't get you there. What got you here won't get you there. Little detail that most people don't notice in the story of David and Goliath is, did you notice what he said he killed the lion and the bear with? He said a club. Did you see that? Because most of the time, I don't know about you, like when I was growing up in Sunday school, I always imagined David killing lions and bears with that same sling, right? The sling that he killed Goliath with, he also killed the lion, he also killed the bear. That's not what he said. He said he used a club. Then did you know, he said, like when they turned on me, I grabbed him by the mouth. Not sure that was the best choice. And then he hit him with the club. So David had a club. I bet I bet he had a favorite one. Like I would have had, he's got the Louisville Slugger, that's his thing, and he's been using it, so he kills a lion with it, and now he's like carving his name into it. He kills a bear, and he starts to have little notches, like 1, 2, 3, and he gets used to using this club, and this club is the thing, and he's won a lot of victories with this club, but then he sees that he's facing a 10-foot tall armored giant with a spear and a shield and a massive helmet, and he's like, club's not going to work on this one. See, but I think what happens to us is our success can kind of get inside of us a little bit, and eventually it can get in the gears and slow us down, because if you had a way of doing things that helped you get some wins in your life, you can almost get addicted to the method. You think this is the way it worked, this is the way it worked, this is the way it worked, and then you hit a situation that's different, and you're like, well, it's worked in the past, I should just keep doing this. And it doesn't. It starts to slow down. Your method stops working. What made you a really good employee might not make you a good boss. There's some pieces of that you're going to have to drop. You're not going to be everybody's buddy anymore. You're going to have to say, hey, you suck at your job. And you didn't. You never said that as a good employee. You were their best friend as an employee, but now you're the boss. You're going to have to say that kind of stuff. What made you good at sales might not make you a good sales manager, right? You could work all those angles being in sales, but now you got to manage a bunch of people just like you. That's different. What got with the study habits that got you A's in high school might not get you A's in college. ChatGPT will work, but you could. The ways that you won before might not be the things that get you to the next thing. What made you a really good married couple might not make you good parents. No, will not make you good parents. I've been there. Me and my wife were married for 5 years before we had our first kid. We learned how to get along, and then variable. Everything was different. Everything was different. We literally just had a conversation 2 days ago. We were sitting on the back deck. She's like, talking about our marriage. I'm like, our marriage would be awesome if we didn't have kids. Like, that's just saying. She's like, yeah, that doesn't matter. I'm like, I know, but I can fantasize about that. But what got us here isn't going to get us there, and you need to remember that. New level, new devil. I gotta find a different way. New season, new strategy. You're gonna have to rethink things. Whatever got you here, whatever got you that success, whatever method you have, it's not going to be the thing necessarily to get you to the next level. So let me ask you, what club do you need to drop? Like David, maybe you had something that's got you some wins here, and you've gotten really used to this way of doing things, but and it's sneaky, you won't even notice, like, why isn't it working anymore? It used to work, why isn't this working anymore? And what thing do you need to maybe drop? Maybe it's a relationship. If you're married, I'm not talking to you. Stop. People always do that. Looking at your spouse right now, stop it. If you're married, not talking about that. But like, it's that friend you've had since high school. And you text them every time something goes on, but they're not, and that served you well. There's nothing wrong with that season. It was a good season, but now it's not what God, they're not helping you get to where God wants you to go. And I'm not saying like, unfriend them. Maybe you go from texting them every day to texting them once a week. Maybe you just need to say, hey, where God is calling me to go, that's not the right direction. What habit? What habit are you doing that maybe served you well for a season, but now it needs to drop? I just talked to a guy on Thursday. He told me, he's like, God actually nudged me a couple years ago. I don't mean to offend any of the men in this room, but he said, God told me to stop playing fantasy football. And all the wives of husbands playing fantasy football said amen, okay? Because if you don't know, like, you can play fantasy football and you can play fantasy football. And he was one of those ones who was so obsessed with it. And it's not sinful. That's not even a bad thing. You could argue, like, what's wrong with fantasy football? Nothing wrong with fantasy football. But God nudged him to stop, and he did. And he's like, here's the thing, and this is cool, because he had talked to me about it when he did it, and I almost was like, dude, who cares? Like, you can play fantasy football. He's like, no, I think God's nudging me to do this. And now here we are. I think it's a couple years later now. And he's like, hey, remember that conversation? I was like, no. But then he reminded me of it. He reminded me of it. I'm like, oh, yeah. And he goes, I'm on the worship team now because of that. And he's like making this connection. He's like, I would have never had time. Like during that seat, I would have never said yes. But when I listened to God in that, now I'm doing this. So what served me then, I had to drop that, and now look at the thing that God has done. And that's what I want you to see. Just because something served you well for a season doesn't mean it's going to be the thing that serves you in the next season. What got you here won't get you there. All right, number 5. If you want to keep momentum, you must avoid the wrong kind of content. The wrong kind of content. Now, I know, you're like, content is a good thing, right? You know a verse, right? Godliness with contentment means great gain. That's a good thing. But pastor, you must be wrong. Can't be wrong being content. Yeah. But there's a fine line between content and complacent. Those are so close together. So I'm calling it the wrong kind of content because what I think we do is we get complacent and we call it content. We get complacent and we mask it by saying, I'm just content right now. You're lying to you. You're telling yourself, I'm content, when in reality, you're complacent. And they are two different things. When you're content, you're grateful. When you're complacent, you're passive. And you know that I'm talking about right in here. You know that. There's a peace that comes with content, but complacent, it's just passive. You don't have that peace. You're just, ugh. When you're content, you're grateful. When you're complacent, you settle. And again, you know the difference. There's a gratitude that comes with content that just washes over you. But when you're complacent, you've just settled. You're actually not very content. You're just like, I guess this is where I am now. There's a difference between the two. Let me say it this way. Contentment becomes complacent when God is calling you to more and you aren't moving. Content becomes complacent when God is calling you to more and you stay right where you are. Again, David could have been complacent killing lions and bears, right? Actually, that would have been a great career. Lions and bears. Dude killed lions and bears. I think he would have made, the Hall of Fame of shepherds. People would have been talking about him like, this guy was a lion and bear slaying monster. What an amazing thing. And he even, I don't know if you noted, if you ever read the whole story, when he shows up on the scene to be interested in fighting Goliath, his own brothers are like, why don't you just kind of, be content with what you've got? His brothers tell him to go away. And that's kind of the thing that happens. When you hit a certain level, people expect you to stop. You should stop. You should just be content. And that might be true, unless God is calling you to more. And I just want to suggest to you that maybe there's an area of your life right now where you've reached good and God is calling you to great. And it's really easy to stop at good. You can argue yourself into good. Nobody's going to complain about good. Nobody's going to confront you about good. But if God's calling you to great, you can't stop at good. That's not content, that's complacent. Just because you have a good marriage doesn't mean God doesn't want you to have a great marriage. Just because you have a good career doesn't mean God doesn't want you to have a great career. Just because you have a good relationship with Jesus doesn't mean God doesn't want you to have a great relationship with Jesus. Don't stop just because you got to good. Listen to what God is calling you. If God is calling you to great, keep going. Keep going. Don't get complacent. So what's an area of your life right now where you are the wrong kind of content? You're settling for good when God is calling you to great. We're in a place right now as a church. We are. Things are amazing here right now. In a couple of years, we will have been in this building for a couple of years. In a couple of weeks, we will have been in this building for 4 years. A couple of weeks, 4 years in this building. First weekend in October. And since we moved in, hundreds and hundreds of people call Mosaic home that didn't before. Hundreds. And that's amazing. I have to do this thing, I just feel like as a pastor, I gotta be fake humble to be this is awesome. This is so cool. I love what God is doing here. I'm not gonna pretend to be sad about something I'm happy, but this is amazing. This is amazing. Raise your hand if you were here when we moved in. This is the most of all the services. And all the people who didn't raise their hand came in since then. And it's been absolutely crazy, the amount of growth that we've experienced as a church. So here's one of the things that happens. I talk to tons of people who come in, and they always tell me all the things that they really like about the church, and sometimes they tell me some things they don't like, and I ignore that, and then I focus on the stuff they say they do. But every once in a while, it's weird because some of the things they like, I get worried about. So one of the things I get all the time is like, well, I just really like the size of the church. You're not, and then they couple it with this. You're not like that church up the road, that really big one. And I always know them, the pastor of that church that they're talking about, or the other church that they're talking about. Have you seen that reel where the wife, it's like a setup, the wife is asking the husband, do you ever wish you were athletic? Have you seen this? Hilarious. The husband, so a wife will like secretly be filming and walk up to her husband and be like, do you ever wish you were athletic? And to the man, every single one of them is highly offended at this question. How could you dare ask if I ever wish I was athletic? I am athletic. And some of them like argue it's hilarious. So whenever somebody says, I'm happy you're not like that church up the road, I'm like, I am athletic. What are you talking about? Like, so offended. But it also worries me. It also worries me. The reason it worries me when somebody says that is because people used to say that to me when we had 100 people going to this church. And people used to say that to me when we had 200 people going to this church. And people said that to me when we had 400 people going to this church. And if you say, well, one of the things I like about the church is the size, like, hey, I get it. I get it. I don't like having to fight for a parking spot. I don't like having to sit next to people. But here's what happens. What you're saying then is like, when I arrived at the church, it became its perfect size. Whatever number I was, that was it. Close the door behind me, right? But do you know what you're doing by doing that? Do you know who you close the door on? You know that family member that you really would wish they'd find faith, or that friend that you've been praying for, or that neighbor that you think about, or coworker? You just said, basically like, crack the door, go to hell, and close it. There was a kid in here first service like, Pastor cussed. Isn't that though? You basically say, if we're saying, hey, we're content as a church, we're saying we don't care about you anymore. But we can't. We specifically, this church, we can't do that because we put it on the wall out there, church for people who don't think church for them. We believe that Jesus really lived 2,000 years ago, really died 2,000 years ago, and it wasn't just a historical event. It's the most important thing that ever happened to me, to you, and to anyone who will listen. We believe it is the most important event ever, and we have this duty, this compulsion to tell as many people about it as possible. So we can't say we're content. We can't. And I have people say this to me sometimes, and usually it's like an insult. It's like, Pastor, when's enough? When are you going to stop? And my answer always is, when everybody follows Jesus, right? And then they're like, well, that's never going to happen. I'm like, well, you answered your own question. Shut up. It's never going to happen. This is our mission. This is our goal. We're here for the people who aren't here yet. We are as interested in the empty seats as we are in the seats that are full right now. Like, that's important that we keep creating more empty seats. So we're gonna make decisions to reach out and create room. Reach out and create room. It's the most important thing. Not baptismal. I want it to get gross. Like, I wanna keep using it over and over. We'll clean it every week, but like, I wanna keep using it as much as possible. Because I think God gave us this mission. I think he positioned us for this mission. He empowered us for this mission. He gifted us for this mission. And here's what I always imagine. So it's been 4 years of being here, and I always kind of project out, like, what's the next 4 gonna be like? Because I couldn't, if you would have asked me 4 years ago what it's gonna look like, I would not have been able to guess. I wouldn't have. But now that I'm sitting here, I'm like, all right, well, if God did that, and that was 4, what would he do here? And then I always imagine out, like, what God could do. And then I like to personalize it. So 2 years from now, we'll have Scare on the Square, and there'll be a mom who comes in here. They'll come through the door, they'll get candy thrown at their head as they're trying to walk in. And they'll come in, and they'll play Candyland in here. We got a life-size Candyland. They'll play Monster Mash. We'll be playing the most un-Jesus-like music ever. And they'll walk out there, and they'll get a lollipop or something. They'll see the kids area over there. They might even walk over and see the slide. And the kid's gonna turn to the mom and go, can we come here? Can we come to church here? And the mom, who really wasn't super interested, she'll be like, okay. And they'll come. And they'll sit over here, or they'll sit over here, and she'll just be here because she's happy that her kid's happy. But some Sunday, it might not be the first, and it might not be the 5th, but at some point, God's gonna do something. He's gonna soften her heart. He's gonna open her eyes. Something's gonna change, and she's gonna have an experience with her Creator. and she's gonna take a step towards him. And like, guys, I just make this like, not making it up. I literally had 3 people come up to me after first service like, that was me, that was me, that was me. Like, that's how important this is. I'm never gonna stop, never gonna stop. That's the wrong kind of content. We have to keep going. We have to keep reaching people. That's the thing God's created us to do. That's why we're here. There's other churches that maybe that's not their thing. This is the thing God's called us to. To quote Uncle Ben, with great momentum comes great responsibility. It's not exactly it, but like God has blessed us. We have to steward this. And we are in the same position as you are as an individual. God's given us momentum. I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to say yes and look, whoa, that was awesome, God, this is so cool. We're just going to sit here. No, I want to know what the next thing is and the next thing is, and I want to keep making decisions to see that happen on repeat, because I believe it is the most important thing in the universe, and I don't want to do anything else but see people say yes to Jesus. I really believe God is up to something here. I'm just thinking about the babies in the nursery. Yeah, I should close. A little bit more, but we'll stop. So back to you. Momentum isn't magic. It isn't. But it is the way God created the world to work, right? In physics, an object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. I think the same thing works in your life. Momentum as a principle of your life will work. Momentum as a spiritual principle will work. Stuck doesn't have to be permanent. But one win won't create momentum either. But when you start to say yes, and then another yes, and another yes, what was an event becomes a trajectory. And then you start to move towards that thing that God has for you in your life, to become the person that God's created you to be and accomplish those crazy dreams that are way out there that start to become not unrealistic as you start to say yes. It's a principle that God uses. David didn't beat Goliath in a day. There's a whole lot of momentum created behind the scenes. The church won't reach the world with the gospel in one sermon. It's going to be one invite at a time, one baptism at a time, one small step of obedience at a time. You need it. Let's pray. Lord, well, I'd like to start by thanking you for those nursery workers right now, Lord. Thank you for their patience and for their love of those little children. I pray for the person in here right now, Lord, who they can make one right decision, but they're having trouble with the second one. I pray that you would give them the courage and the boldness and the energy to make that second right choice. I pray for the people who got baptized last week, Lord, that you would immediately start speaking that next thing, so that they would get on it and they would say yes to you on the second yes. I pray for the person right now, Lord, who is complacent. They've got some good things in their life, but you're calling them to great. Pray that they would not settle, Lord. And I pray for this church, Lord, thank you so much for what you're doing. I'm blown away. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed of how good you've been. It really does never get old how good you've been. But I don't want to get complacent, Lord. I know you've called us to continue to reach people. I know you've called us to spread that gospel of what you've done for us as far and wide as we possibly can. Help us not to lose that passion, that fire, sight of that mission. Thank you for what you're doing, Lord. Help us not to screw it up. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.